You are at the CSforAll Support Resources and Grant Overview hosted by Trivium Consulting. So if you thought you were at a different webinar, now's the time to recheck your calendar. And I'm going to turn it over to Ana Suarez to just acknowledge our partners.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That's helpful. Hello, everyone. I'm Ana Suarez, and I'm the president of Trivium Consulting. We help organizations compete for federal funding, find the funding, and actually go after those funds. We are supported by the National Science Foundation in partnership with the STARS Alliance, which is a broadening participation in computing organization. Anything that we express today is really our opinion and recommendations and does not reflect those of NSF necessarily. Again, welcome, and we're very excited to have you here and to support, hopefully, your submission to CSforAll program. So, Elizabeth?
Super, next slide. So who do you have here in the room today? As you just heard, Ana Suarez will be with us today, and she's the president and owner of Trivium Consulting. Trivium launched officially in 2015. Before that, Ana was the associate VP at the Implementation Group, where she provided strategic grant services to STEM organizations. And prior to her work at TIG, Ana was a program director at NSF. I'm Elizabeth Tobias. I'm a senior grant writer and lead project manager with Trivium Consulting. I arrived here after 2.5 decades working in the nonprofit arts and arts education sectors. And since joining Trivium, I've provided writing support for successful proposals from the DoD, the EDA, IMLS, and NSF, among other alphabet soup agencies. I also provide project management support and compliance training to our nonprofit partners. And Hannah Schwartz is our most important team member here today. She's handling logistics of our presentation, and we'll be also sharing some of the resources we have on our website specific to CSforAll. So as far as logistics today, let me just reiterate that I apologize that I didn't successfully turn off the chat. I would appreciate it if you have a Q&A, if you add it to the Q&A box so that it's tracked in that tool on Zoom, and we'll have time at the end to respond. And now, just a quick turnover to Ana Suarez, who's going to give us our goal for this round of support as well as this webinar. Next slide, please.
So today, we're going to share with you some of the resources that Trivium has developed with NSF support to support small and medium submissions to the CSforAll RPP with a February 2025 deadline.
Great, and just to reiterate that this is all because, thank you, NSF, we are supported by a supplement from the NSF. What we're able to provide is without charge to your organizations. So great, next slide. Lovely. So with that goal identified, here's the agenda for this session. We're going to go over the solicitation itself. We do have a range of experience levels in the room, so we will take some time to make sure we're all up to speed on what this solicitation is and some basic information about submitting to the NSF. And then we'll describe in more detail what resources and supports we're able to offer on this particular round of support. And then we'll also have time for hopefully a robust Q&A. We would like to ask, if you're able, that you respond to the exit survey. And this way we can get an idea of who is actually in the room and what support specifically you're looking for after we've gone through those descriptions. And that way we can really mindfully and thoughtfully apply those resources that we have. Super, next slide. So a quick overview of some dates and deadlines. We love a deadline. We're asking that you return those surveys, those exit surveys that I just mentioned, by September 3rd. I know that it may feel as though we're a little far out from the February deadline, but especially given that we have the holidays in there, we're really not that far out at all. And we want to make sure that we give you guys ample time to engage and for us to give whatever supports we're able to give. And also just a reminder that the deadline for submission for this round of CS4All is February 12th, 2025, 5 p.m. submitters local time. So whichever organization is submitting, the lead organization, it's their local time. And we also highly recommend, as I'm sure you all do, the best you can to do, that when you calendar a solicitation like this, anything from the NSF or any federal agency, that you set your internal deadline at least 2 business days before the actual deadline, because you will inevitably discover while you're trying to upload things that there are either glitches in their system or issues on your side that you weren't aware of until you started the actual submission process. Next slide. So just some clarity around eligibility. The 3 types of organizations that are eligible to be the submitting applicants on a CS4All grant are IHEs, so institutes of higher education, public or private, doesn't matter. Non-academic nonprofits. So if you are a nonprofit organization, you are eligible to be the lead submitter, the leading submitting organization on a CS4All, or tribal governments. Unlike some other NSF RFPs, this one calls out that only these 3 are eligible. For those of you who may be familiar with NSF, the PAPPG has a whole set of may be eligible categories. They include local governments and some for-profits. This RFP supersedes that, and only these 3 types of institutions are eligible. And this is a change from the past. This most recent iteration of the RFP that came out earlier this year had that change. So if you are one of those types of organizations, local government or a school or school district, or if you're a for-profit, you would need to partner with someone who is eligible, and they would have to be the submitting organization. Next slide. So a little background information. I always think that it's valuable to consider the intention of a funding organization. It's a strategy that I encourage with clients, regardless of whether they're seeking funding from a public or a private source. Every funding agency or foundation has a why. They have guidelines and guiding principles that lead how and why they're giving money. And sometimes when you're in the thick of creating your project or the passion for your mission-driven organization, it's easy to forget that why that the funding organization or agency has to adhere to. So let's look at where CS4All lives at the NSF. So starting with the center panel, CS4All exists within both the Directorate for Computer Science and Engineering, Computer Information Science and Engineering, or SISE, and the Directorate for STEM Education, or EDU, within the NSF. So it lives within both of those. So it's worthwhile, as we move over to the left panel, the orange panel, to consider the goals of both of those directorates. So SISE has a goal of advancing research, innovation, and education in CS, IS, and computer engineering fields, right? EDU has a goal of developing a well-informed citizenry and a diverse and capable STEM workforce. So I just think it's really good to look at these high-level objectives of these directorates, because some of the language isn't necessarily what you would expect, right? And I would note that broadening participation, equitable access, inclusivity, these are core values of not only the NSF in general, but of SISE and EDU in specific. And also there's a lot of mention of developing the future workforce. The CS4All initiative specifically isn't a workforce initiative, right? We're not talking about partnering with industry in order to provide internship opportunities. That's not appropriate. But it's good to remember that these are overall objectives of these directorates. The goal of the CS4All is to provide all US students with the opportunity to participate in computer science and computational education in their schools. So now we're over in that right-hand blue panel. In their schools is an important thing to note. This is a formal education RFP. So if what you do is in what the NSF terms informal education, right, something that happens outside of the classroom, this isn't the right RFP for you. This has to be happening in classrooms. So what does this context mean for an applicant? In addition to any other decisions that you need to make, all the myriad of decisions, it's also worthwhile to give yourself an ongoing gut check. Does the work have the possibility of impacting the greater citizenry and their capability to engage with STEM in the future? And can the project demonstrate broadening participation as a core value as opposed to an afterthought? Next slide. Now let's talk specifically about the structure of this RFP, the CSforAll structure. Not all NSF solicitations have the same structure, so it's good to really check how this is organized. CSforAll is organized into 4 strands, and each strand has a different focus or objective, and we'll go over those more specifically in a couple of slides. The strands are pre-K through 8, high school, what's called the pre-K through 14 pathways, and it's often just referred to as pathways, and research. So it has those 4 strands, and it's worth noting that those first 3 strands all require an RPP, a researcher practitioner partnership, and we'll unpack that a little bit later. The 4th strand, the research strand, does not require an RPP. So then funding levels and project timelines for this solicitation are organized in proposal class sizes, small, medium, and large. And we'll go into a little bit more granular detail in a moment. For the first 3 strands, pre-K through 8, high school, and pathways, you can apply at any of the 3 proposal class sizes, right? So you could do a small K through 8, you could do a small high school, small pathways, or a medium or a large. The research strand is not broken down that way. The research strand has 1 support size, 1 budget and timeline. Great, and next slide. Now let's dig into these strands a little bit more specifically. Each one has a unique focus, and I would say they're not just organized based on the grade level. The names of the strands kind of make it seem like, oh, as long as I'm serving high school students, I should apply for the high school strand, right? But they have a little bit more specific and complex focus. And there's some specific activities that are appropriate for each strand. And just to reiterate that this is for activities or approaches or innovations that are happening in the formal or in-school learning environment. Out of school or informal learning, this is not the correct RFP for it. So the pre-K through 8 strand is focused on designing, developing, and piloting instructional materials that integrate CS and/or CT into pre-K through 8 classrooms. Some ideas of appropriate activities could be the development and study of prototype instructional materials, the teaching and testing of CS and/or CT concepts, integrating them with other content, development of tools and models to support underrepresented students, perhaps the creation of developmentally appropriate learning progressions, the design of classroom-based assessments, or the development of PD or teacher support related to some of those bullet points above. The strand is definitely focused on instruction and instructional materials, but a competitive proposal within this strand will be innovative in its approach, materials, or outcomes, and be ready to show clearly that the curricula and/or materials don't currently exist, or that the innovation is valuable, it's a valuable adaptation to serve an underrepresented group. So it may be that you have materials or supports that there's some research on them already, but you are suggesting that there's an adjustment to them or a new round of research that supports better engagement by a particular underrepresented group. The high school strand It's really focused on preparing and supporting teachers to teach rigorous CS courses. It's especially in the last few cycles, the NSF has expressed clearly in their own webinars and in the RFP itself that it's seeking to address the critical shortage of teachers in this field. So a competitive proposal would tackle key elements of teacher preparation. It could include recruitment, right? How do you recruit new people to CS, specifically underrepresented groups being represented by the teachers who are teaching CS, because we know that representation matters with student engagement. Robust and effective PD that may be differentiated based on the backgrounds of the folks you are recruiting. You're seeking to bring new people into teaching CS, and so you need to have a different approach to PD. Or maybe a variety of access points, again, because you're trying to recruit more diverse groups of teachers. And it's always good if it leads to certification and pre-service pathways. There could be studies that inform state or local policy on CS requirements, or the designing, piloting, and assessing of scalable mechanisms for ongoing support of classroom teachers. Let's not recruit them and train them and then leave them hanging. An important note that while this strand does seem solely focused on teacher PD, there is a possibility to have a successful and competitive high school strand that is enhancing instructional materials. For this type of activity, the solicitation specifically identifies studying the national scaling of supports that have already been developed. And it calls out a couple of opportunities: ECS, which is exploring computer science, the APCS courses and exam, and Bootstrap that integrates mathematics and CS together. The pathway strand, as K through 14 indicates, it's focused on designing pathways that support school districts in developing policies and supports for incorporating CS or CT across all grades, and potentially transitioning into 2-year or 4-year institutions. That's why it's called the pre-K through 14 pathways. Activities might include course sequencing or alignments, articulation from pre-K through 12 to 2 or 4-year, and or district or state systems that assess and track student progress. And finally, the research strand seeks to support the development of evidence-based knowledge that illuminates how the teaching and learning of computing best occurs and how it can be most effectively supported for diverse students. As we mentioned, this strand, the research strand, has not been the focus of our support. Our supplement was given to us specifically to support small and medium RPP strand. So the resources that we have already built out, as well as the ones we're able to provide, are really centered around those strands. But perhaps they might be valuable to you if you're doing a research strand as well. And I do want to address the inclusion of AI as a central part of your proposal. Some of you may have seen or received the Dear Colleague letter that expressed NSF's encouragement of projects that research AI as a fast-growing technology that is clearly impacting education. This is an agency interest. There is no separate solicitation. It just means that for a solicitation like CSforAll, if AI is central to your proposal, in the title, you add Educate AI : at the beginning of that title. That's all that needs to be done to incorporate that. Great, next slide. That was a long one. I promise it won't be that long again. So now let's talk about the class sizes, right? This is for the RPP strands, pre-K through 8, high school or K through 14 pathways. They can be submitted at the small, medium, or large class size. The smalls have a cap of $300,000 and up to 3 years. I do say up to because I think it's important to know that it's a small. It's only $300,000. So let's say you think you can legitimately get the work done in a year and a half. That's fine. It doesn't have to span over the full amount. And then a medium has a cap of $1 million and 3 years. And I do want to note that it doesn't say this in the RFP, but this was clearly stated in the NSF's webinar on this, which you can see online, and we actually have a link to it on our resource page. Smalls, the expectation is their impact is going to be more local, right? School or district. If you're applying for a medium, the expectation by the NSF is you're going to have an impact at a state or regional level. So while you're assessing which is the right level for you to be applying at, that's a gut check I would fold in. And then a large has a cap of $2 million and 4 years, and the expected impact is national. So really think long and hard before you decide to go after a large. I know the money and the time are attractive, but it is extraordinarily competitive. And in every way, the NSF has indicated that it is really seeking more robust applications at the small and medium level, and that the large has a much higher bar. The research strand has its own single class size that has a $750,000 cap and 3 years. Great, next slide. So what is an RPP? It's worth taking a moment to delve into this. It's a different approach pioneered by the CSforAll solicitation. RPP stands for Researcher Practitioner Partnership, and it acknowledges the fact that all of the innovation and brilliant research in the world can't truly impact students and learners if the folks that are in the room with them on a day-to-day basis aren't integrated into the process as full partners from the beginning. Their insight, their knowledge, their unique expertise and experience, those are equally valued with the insight, knowledge, experience, and expertise of researchers. So an RPP seeks to bring together these two communities of thought and practice. And historically, those two communities have been siloed from one another. They have different ways of working. They often have different taxonomy and lexicons. And the RPP structure really seeks to start to break down those barriers and bring them in as equal partners in more than just lip service, right? It's baked into the solicitation. Now you'll note that this graphic has 3 groupings, and the reason why we did it that way is because community engagement is really also a critical part of the RPP, specifically because broadening participation is at the core of this solicitation. And we all know that if you're building even the most wonderful research project in the world, if you have not valued and brought in community members with lived experience in the community you are seeking to engage with and impact, then the long-term impact and sustainability and buy-in of that program or that idea is in jeopardy. And it's not just about lip service or a base level placement, like, oh, look, we have a couple folks on our advisory board, but really, how are you signaling in your proposal that you understand the critical component of community engagement from the beginning? Next slide. So there are some resources that they're linked in the RFP, but we wanted to also call them out here. There are many great resources out there beyond the ones that Trivium is developing, and they can help you in supporting and ideating and crafting a strong RPP. And some of those innovators, I don't know if anybody's in the room today, but some of them are participating or responded to this call. CSforAll.org is an amazing advocate for the RPP approach, and they have tons of resources. We encourage you to go to their website. There's actually a study by Sage Fox that provides tools that can help support you in crafting an RPP. Those additional resources are great background and support as you envision and move forward in creating a strong research practitioner partnership. Next slide. All right, so I believe most of you have experience with the NSF, but I just want to point out the merit review criteria, right? The NSF doesn't give you a rubric, depending on the background of your organization and which agencies or private foundations you're used to applying for funding. There's no, you'll get 50 points for this and 10 points for that. The NSF merit review criteria are both considered for all proposals, and they're considered equally. Intellectual merit, the simplest way to express that is, how is your project going to advance the field, right? So in this case, how is it going to build knowledge, specifically in STEM education? And broader impact, how is your project going to benefit society, or how could it potentially benefit society? And I would strongly recommend you consider looking at this through the lens of broadening participation in computing. Next slide. Because this particular solicitation has what we call an additional solicitation-specific review criteria centered around broadening participation. It is core not only to the NSF, but it is a focus of the SIZE Directorate, and it is core specifically to this solicitation. We know there are lower participation levels in STEM education and ultimately in the STEM workforce for several minoritized groups, as well as women, non-neurotypical learners, and those with other differing abilities. CSforAll has solicitation-specific review criteria that specifically addresses this commitment, and I'm going to use the word demands because it is strongly stated in the RFP that you address these two questions within your proposal. Does the proposal identify the characteristics and needs of the intended population to be served? And does the proposal include specific plans or strategies for addressing or accommodating the needs of participants of the intended population? And we would encourage you always to look at this not only from a deficit approach, but from an opportunity approach. The ongoing lack of participation or lack of inclusion of certain groups in STEM education is a detriment to all, to education, to the workforce. What do we lose as a society by repeatedly, generation after generation, not having these groups at the table, engaged, fully participating? So a deficit-based approach is not the best way to go about this. An asset-based approach is important. And just so they couldn't make it any clearer, I mean, in the solicitation, this sentence at the bottom is in that solicitation, and it's in bold in the solicitation. I can't think of any other time when I've seen something in bold in an NSF solicitation. So it's definitely true and clear that BPC cannot be an afterthought to your project, or your project will not be competitive. Next slide.
There are two locations online where proposals are typically submitted, research.gov and grants.gov. I'm sure there's familiarity with each of them in this room. They have unique submission systems, so it's highly recommended to take the time before trying to submit your proposal to learn the online portal. Research.gov actually has a training program and demo site built into their website. So it's specifically for the purpose of becoming familiar with what their requirements are in their submission process. Initially, however, every submitting organization must be registered with sam.gov, and that process can take a lot of time. So if your organization is not yet registered with them, please initiate that process now. It usually can take longer than is expected, and you won't be able to work within research.gov or grants.gov without that registration. So we very strongly encourage starting that process as soon as possible.
Super. I'm not going to go, thank you so much, Hannah. I'm not going to go into too much details about what to submit, but this is a full comprehensive list of all the proposal components for a CSforAll. And again, this slide deck will be available on our website afterwards, along with a recording. There's a couple of things that I wanted to call out on this list because they're either different or new, or there's something we see that continually gives the hicks and the giddy up for folks. The first thing I wanted to call out is the postdoctoral or graduate mentoring plan. Even if you've had experience in the past with NSF proposals, this is slightly changed. I believe they just did that this year. That it used to just be if you have postdocs involved in your grant, you had to have a mentoring plan. But now if you have graduate students, it's not just postdocs, it's also graduate students. You have to have this additional document submitted, which is a mentoring plan for them. Another thing that tends to catch people out are the letters of collaboration. Letters of support are not allowable. So some glowing letter of support from someone is not going to be allowable. The letters of collaboration have a very specific sort of 2-sentence required statement. And that's all that can be in the letter of collaboration. And it has to be on the letterhead of the partner who is for whom you are, who's agreeing to collaborate. One sticking point that I notice regularly is it's required to have the title of the proposal. And so sometimes folks go, great, I'm gonna go get my letters of collaboration right away. And then throughout the iteration and development of the proposal, the title changes, and then you have to go back and get those letters again. So while you may be tempted to get them early, wait until you're sure that the title is set. And the other thing on the other side is folks go, well, they're just letters of collaboration, so they're not important. They are important. If someone is called out in your proposal, get a letter of collaboration from them. You don't want panel review comments that say, well, you included this, but we didn't see proof that they're actually engaging. And also just to note that if your proposal engages with tribes or tribal nations or tribal governments, there are specific requirements about that in the RFP and in the PAPPG. And then the last thing I wanted to call out is the particular elements that are associated with Science CV. I think we're maybe 2 years into them using that system for biosketches and current and pending support. But then they did a change, I think actually 2 changes on the format. So I just want to call out, I would assume you're starting from scratch. Any of your co-PIs or PIs or key personnel, you have to have biosketches in current and pending, and it has to be done through Science CV. So that is something I would say get them started right away on, because it's there, they need to input the information and then output a PDF. And then synergistic activities, which used to be included on the biosketches, are no longer included on the biosketches through Science CV, but we know that synergistic activities are actually a critical way that we expand and diversify our PIs, co-PIs, and key personnel. So folks who may not have a ton of publications or who may not have particular elements that go on a biosketch, but the place where they shine and show how they support your proposal is in the synergistic activities section. That section is still requested and allowed. It's just as an additional attachment. It's not inside of the biosketches anymore. And then also, I just wanted to say that CSforAll has its own additional list of project personnel. The description of it is in the proposal, but again, sometimes folks overlook that as they're busy developing their great proposal, and suddenly this is a detail at the end that they are surprised by. Next slide. All right, so Hannah is going to walk us through the resources that we have. Because we are in our second round of this support through the NSF, on the June 4th deadline, we developed several resources that are available to you. So Hannah, go ahead and walk us through those.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So we do have on our Trivium Consulting website up at the top here, if you feel like learning more about our organization, feel free to visit. But we do have the CSforAll tab, which will bring you to this page. And it's specific resources that we developed, like Elizabeth mentioned, for the June 4th submission deadline of this year. So everything is as recent as we can be. So the like Elizabeth mentioned, Science CV had many updates. Most recent one was May 20th of this year with their formatting. So we've done our best to make sure that all of our resources are up to date with those changes. So we have an FAQ page, which is updated as questions come up. And we haven't had to have an update in quite a while, but that will, I'm sure, be changing soon as we get more questions through these different webinars that we're offering on this second round. We also have things broken down into different types of support. We have ideation supports, narrative specific supports. So that helps you look through a crosswalk of what a medium RPP may be step by step. A logic model template, we try to create things that just give you a springboard so you don't have to think about, okay, I have this fabulous idea. What format do I put it in? Here's a format for you that you can use and then build upon. We have budget supports, and that also goes through and looks at the nitty-gritty of looking at research.gov and how do you submit a budget into that specific scenario. And we have templates for budget justifications as well. We have supplementary document supports for all the different types that we talked about earlier. The graduate student mentoring plan, we have some redacted samples if you want to just see previous examples of what you could, again, build upon. And then we have the webinar slides available from what we had earlier this year, and that will also include the slides from this webinar, as you can see coming soon. We did include a section with specific and pertinent NSF documents that has the actual PAPPG. We have the Educate AI Dear Colleague letter that Elizabeth mentioned earlier and how you incorporate that into the title of your proposal. We have the actual CSforAll solicitation from 2024, and we have specific resources that the NSF has created with their own webinars that Elizabeth mentioned earlier as well. On the left side here, you just see all of these YouTube links. These will be recordings of the webinars. So this recording will go up on the website soon. Lower down, we repeated that list of the external online resources. That was the slide that we had previously, just as a nice little reminder of, hey, we don't have all of the information, so please use other resources that we have found useful in the past. And then we do have a contact email specifically for CSforAll support. So if you're interested in getting one-on-one help or have additional questions outside of the webinar setting, this is a great place to do that. We will head back to our slides.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for that. I did want to also call out really quickly, there's one other element that's mentioned in the FAQ and also is on that website, which is the REU. That's additional funding that you can request if you have undergraduate students involved in your project. So there is the link to that solicitation and also a really clear on the FAQ, what I hope is clear, instructions on how to incorporate that and what you need to do to incorporate that. Given the smaller size of these awards and also the opportunities they allow for folks who may be going into STEM education who are undergraduates, that can be a really valuable additional funding and support resource for your CSforAll. Super, so next slide. So you have the availability of those resources. They're yours for the taking, including the email, which is basically you're emailing me. It's just not my general Trivium email. That way I can sort out questions that have to do with CSforAll. But we are hoping, resources permitting, that we may be able to provide some one-on-one support on this round. So Anna, will you share Elizabeth, that's me. Will you share a little bit about what resubmission support might look like?
Sure. So obviously, when you get decline from NSF or any agency, it's really depressing, and often we just want to put those away and not look at them. But it's super important that instead you look at the comments and put them into 3 categories. We can do this for you, but in preparation for maybe meeting with one of our grant writers, you would put things under a negative, positive, or neutral comments. That's what we do. So then you get to see, by doing that, you are able to see which areas really the panel consistently thought there were issues. Like research may be one, your partnerships may be other, things like that. A next step would be to look at those and then with your team, decide how which of those are the ones that you agree with that need to be addressed and how you and your team will address them. That's really critical. If you do that work, either prior to meeting with a program officer to talk about how you're going to address those issues, or meeting with one of the folks at Trivium, you've already done your a lot of the work that allows you to get information to update your narrative and really think about how to address those issues in your future submission. So, Elizabeth?
Super, thank you. And also, resources permitting, we may be able to provide some feedback or editing on your narrative. This will really be determined by the state of the narrative. We don't, unfortunately, on this round have enough resources for full one-on-one ideation support and crafting. But if your narrative is, let's say, in its second or third draft, and you just want an outside eye to look at it, we may, and we're hoping to have the supports to do that. Super, next slide. So now we're going to open up for the Q&A. Are there any Q&A in the box, Hannah? Because I can't see them. There are. Yeah. Should I reclaim host and will I be able to see them then? You're muted.
I will no longer be able to share my screen, so I can read them.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay. So first question, would it be correct to think that the high school strand is a better fit for a proposal focused on teacher professional development rather than the PK-8 strand?
The way that I would answer that is it depends on what the professional development is about, right? So if you're doing a PD that is specifically around a kind of materials that you've developed, and then you need, or an approach that you've developed, say integration, and you need to, as part of that, you want to test or pilot a PD associated with that innovation, then that's pre-K through 8. If it's general PD for teachers, then that is high school strand. Did that seem unspecific? Go ahead, Anna.
Let me unmute you, Anna.
Let's just keep Anna and me both unmuted for this part because hopefully she'll jump in a lot.
I don't think she can necessarily. What I would say there is, add to what Elizabeth said, is that, again, the high school strand, what NSF is looking for is PD that helps teachers get to the point of being able to do the AP CSP course, the ECS course, etc. So it's not really, they're not looking for you to develop new curriculum or anything like that. So I guess I think of it is that pre-K through 8, it's, you can do curriculum, you can do PD and so on. High school, they're really looking for PD that is focused on getting teachers to be able to teach existing resources that they've already funded. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I kind of look at those two strands.
Super, next question, Hannah.
Okay, there is another one asking if I want to work with a large district, would that still qualify for a medium-sized proposal?
That could even qualify for a small. If you're only working with one district, I mean, unless like, look, I live in Southern California, so there's an argument to be made that if you're working with LAUSD, you are having a regional impact because LAUSD is larger than some states, right? But you would really have to make the case if you're only working with one district, even if it's large, if you're going after a medium for that district rises to the level of regional impact. right? So it's interesting, right? Because the class size is not necessarily related to the number of classrooms or students that you're seeking to engage, which is different, right? It is the types of activities and the impact. Anna, go ahead, because I think you probably have things to say about that.
No, I think there has definitely been a shift in the solicitation and what NSF is funding from previous CS4Alls to now. They really are, as Elizabeth is saying, looking for regional for that large, excuse me, for that medium level project. So I think that if you have questions, if you're just working with a school district, it depends again. I think you're going to probably be in general in a medium, in a small, unless it's something like what Elizabeth highlighted. If you're not sure, I would really encourage you to reach out to one of the program officers, either Jeff Forbes or Allison Kennedy.
Or Feng Feng.
Yes, to give you guidance.
Super. Additional questions?
There was one more question submitted. Are there any stats on acceptance rates by strand over the past years, or any regional distribution on which states have been funded or will have an advantage in being supported by the NSF?
We would all love those stats, wouldn't we? We have asked for them too. I will say that they have indicated in every way possible, as directly as they can, that they are most interested in small and medium sized proposals. It's supported by, they in the RFP, they give the sort of estimates of expected number of awards. They set it in their webinar. They are indicating in every way possible that that is their focus. As far as regional is concerned, Anna, I'll hand that over to you because I'm sure you'll want to talk about regional impact.
Yes. To add to what Elizabeth's saying, obviously you can go on the NSF if you haven't already, CSforAll, and they have the map, and they have by states the number of projects or proposals they've funded. In terms of state, if you are from an EPSCoR state, these are states that tend not to get as much, compete as well for NSF funding across the board. That's like Alabama, Tennessee, Maine, Vermont, Montana, etc. There's a list. Those states, NSF is looking to fund, and they do look at that as when they're making their decisions internally. That doesn't mean that they're not funding. Obviously, when you look at the CSforAlls that have been funded, they are funding plenty in states that are not EPSCoR states. So we encourage you, if you're in Texas or California or Florida or any state that is not EPSCoR, we still encourage you to definitely submit. It's just that they want to spread the wealth geographically, and that does play into a decision if it's between, let's say, two proposals, one from an EPSCoR and one from a non-EPSCoR state. They will, that will weigh in to their decisions.
I have a few questions that are specific to the research strand. So one is a clarification. Is a postdoctoral researcher can not apply on their own, but can only support a faculty member on an application. Is that true? Okay.
There is no eligibility limitations on who can be a PI. However, are you more competitive if you are not so emerging in your career? Yes. However, let's say you are someone who is representative of a historically underrepresented group in PIs. Make that case. make that case why it's important to broaden participation in the PIs that were represented as well. And in your proposal, make sure that you signal all the way through that you know that you are very early in your career. And here are the places where you have already got support to make sure that your project is sustainable.
Right.
What I would add to what Elizabeth said is that you really want to look at the team as well. So obviously, if you have someone who is publishing in the field and has been NSF funded with a track record with the agency, you will want that person on your team. That would be really helpful. Even if you're a co-PI, I mean, you could be a PI as a graduate student. And they do look for folks with track records. So you may want to serve as a co-PI and have the team members have a track record, at least a subset of them with the agency. One, because it's not only does that bring credibility immediately to the team, but also it brings credibility because they have experience implementing projects and will help you with the implementation and so forth and mentor you through that process as well. So there's a great reason why having a team with different level of expertise and background with the agency is a plus.
Thank you. Another research specific for the research strand, could it focus on out of school, involve co-developing tools or curriculum with teachers and students, etc.?
CSforAll is a formal education solicitation. So without seeing the details of it, my first answer would be that's less competitive, because if what you are researching is informal education, then that seems off topic. I would have to see more specifically what your project description is to see if it has to flow into the classroom at some point. If it doesn't flow into the classroom, it's not CSforAll. There are other solicitations that it might be great for, but it's not CSforAll if it doesn't flow into the formal education environment.
Yeah, the thing I would add to what Elizabeth said, the ASL solicitation in EDU, if you're not familiar with it, would be great for informal. Look at that. iTest also has formal and informal, so you can look at those two solicitations.
Thank you. The last question that I currently have, and please feel free, everyone, to keep submitting questions. Are there resources available for the research strand specifically?
So some of the resources that we have on there would be applicable to the research strand, right? Budget is budget is budget. Supplementary documents are supplement your documents or supplementary documents. Even I think arguably, some of the ideation supports, aligning it with the RFP or the logic model, those could be utilized as you develop a robust and competitive research strand. But we don't have our crosswalks. We didn't create a crosswalk template because, again, we were funded specifically to focus on the small and medium RPPs. And if and when you do either look at the slides for or watch the webinars that we have, you just may notice a lot of talking about the small and medium RPPs. Try not to get frustrated with us for that. That's where our support was. But hopefully those might provide some support in developing a competitive research strand proposal as well.
One suggestion I would also make is we don't have that as a resource, but requesting going through the projects that are currently funded through NSF CSforAll solicitation, looking at the awards and the abstracts, selecting something that is most align with the project that you are thinking of doing and requesting that a copy of the proposal from the PI is often very helpful. You can also go through NSF and request a copy of the proposal. It just takes longer, but they do send it to you. I think that that's always helpful to read what has been funded through different strands that you are targeting. And just to get some ideas of how they presented things, etc.
Super smart. Are there other questions?
There was one that came up. What is particular about the research strand? Like, what differences are there between the research and the RPP?
Well, the main difference is that it's one funding level and one funding, like one class size, right? It's 750K and it's I think 2 years. I can't remember. I don't have it right in front of me right now. There aren't multiple class sizes. And the research strand itself, its objectives are different, right? So we talked about the fact that the pre-K through 8 strand is really about curriculum and material development. The high school strand is really about teacher, like, right, getting more teachers who are ready to teach. And the pathway strand is about aligning a pathway all the way through, pre-K through 14, so that folks can matriculate through. The research strand is really about supporting the development of evidence-based knowledge that illuminates how the teaching and learning of computing might best occur, right? So that's sort of its objective or its focus, if that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Great. So let's go to the next slide, because I think some folks are leaving and we want to make sure that we give them this before they go. We hope that you will take a moment to fill out the exit survey. This will help us realize who was in the room and what supports you might be looking for and might be most valuable. And if we do have resources available for one-on-one support, this will help us know who we are able to give those to. And I will send a follow-up email that has this link, so folks who left or who weren't able to come to the live webinar will have the opportunity. We're asking that you get those to us by September 3rd, so that we really have ample time to either point you in the right direction or determine and realize if we have additional resources to provide any one-on-one support.
I would also like to encourage you all to submit. I mean, NSF is really looking for proposals to come in. They're now in a new fiscal year. As of October 1st, they'll get new funds. So really come in with your great ideas.
So Tonya asked a question. This says February. Is it the same? I'm not sure what that means. I will say that I'm not sure what the question is.
The survey due date that we just invented ourselves is the September 3rd. The CSforAll due date is the February. So it's
Yes.
two separate submissions. One is
right,
just
so
available to us, and the other one is the overall.
And the reason why we're asking for the exit survey in September is because that really gives ample time for us to provide support if we're able to, or to point you in the right direction. Long before your February 12th. Yes. Oh, okay. So it says February webinar. That's because this webinar is related to the February submission deadline. I'm sorry that naming made it confusing. We have a series of supports that were related to the June deadline. This webinar is focused on the February deadline. No, there's no duh. That's on us, not on you. Absolutely. Too many deadlines, too many notes. That's what they say about Mozart, right? Too many notes. Super, so thank you. Last slide. thank you all again, and please do go to the webpage. There's lots of supports on there. Open up that FAQ. It's full of live links, and we'll, I'm sure, be adding to it as we go. Feel free to email me at the CSforAll support triviumconsulting.com email address with specific questions, and I will do my best to answer them or find somebody else who knows how to answer them. And again, we're grateful for you participating and being interested. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.